you know, this is a demand that has to be put forward not only by me, the Prime Minister of Israel, but by anyone who wants peace. Everybody should turn to President Abbas and say what I said today in Congress: tear up your pact with Hamas. Sit down and negotiate peace. Make peace with the Jewish state.
This is recent, though, and it's obviously problematic, because you've got, if you described a very small landmass, and you know you're dealing with Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, and
it's a tough neighborhood. Let me tell you.
It's a tough neighborhood. I think you were very, very clear in all of that. If they do not recognize Israel, if that recognition does not come, peace cannot come.
That's right. Well, that's what the Americans say too.
Yes.
The formal American position is they've got to recognize the state of Israel about Hamas, and they've got to give up terror. They say, since signing this initial pact with the Palestinian Authority, we're never going to recognize Israel. We're committed to the obliteration of the Zionist entity, and we'll continue the armed struggle. You know what that is? That's a polite term for terrorism.
Sure.
In the meantime, they're putting into Gaza about 10,000 rockets, which they fire on us. They've already fired 6,000 rockets on us. They're amassing more. So they're not a partner for peace. I don't think anybody listening to us, and anybody in Washington, any fair-minded viewer or observer of the Middle East would really expect Israel to do this, and they don't. I mean, fair-minded governments don't expect that. But I think it was important that this was said by President Obama. I think that's very, very important.
And coming up, the Prime Minister delivers a very strong message to Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and the enemies of Israel. And then later, you will hear from the former aide to Governor Sarah Palin, who has released a scathing tell-all memoir. What are his motives? Plus an update on the deadly tornadoes that ripped through Oklahoma City and its suburbs just a short time ago. We have a live update on the tornado warning that is in effect right now in Dallas, Texas. We also have video of this developing situation coming up straight ahead. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was interrupted early and often by applause today during his speech to a joint meeting of Congress. Now, following his address, I sat down with him for a cable exclusive, and here is tonight's final installment of our conversation. Over the years that I've had a chance to interview you, you talked about moral clarity, how Iran, Ahmadinejad, denies the Holocaust, repeatedly talks about Israel's destruction, wiping Israel off the map.
That's right.
You talked about a real, clear, and present danger. You talked about this being an epic moment in history.
Right.
Explain that.
Well, in the broad Middle East, there's a big contest between democracy and tyranny, and we all know what we want to happen. We want to see democracy win out. It'll be a tremendous thing if you actually have democracies in all the Arab countries. But there are people who have another idea, and they want not democracy, but theocracies. They want a reimposition of dictatorships. And those forces are led by Iran. If Iran gets nuclear weapons, they will dominate the entire region. I'll tell you something. If Iran gets nuclear weapons, that's the end of the Arab Spring. You'll have an Iranian winter descend on the entire Middle East. So both for the sake of freedom and for the sake of our common interests and our own survival, we better make sure that Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons. And I appreciated the President's reiteration in his statements the other day that the United States will not enable Iran to develop nuclear weapons, they're committed to preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
It was interesting. You described you had a free moment.
Yeah.
And you walked around Washington with your wife. One of the things that really stood out in my mind is you have a almost deep reverence for this country, its history, what it stands for, a deep knowledge of our founders, our framers, our Constitution, and how that ties these two countries together, Israel and the United States. And I was reading that in particular, and it struck me that that is the natural yearning of mankind. That's what we talk about, you know, natural rights of human beings endowed by their creator. Yeah. It really is played out in your life personally, and you described that a little bit in the speech today when you talked about your brother who was killed in the raid in Entebbe, and how you fought for freedom. The cost has been high. How do you tie those two together, this ideal and the cost? Well,
I was strolling the other day. our American security guards are much more generous than the Israeli security guards.
You guys have been very tough on me.
No, well, see, the Americans let me out. They let me out. I could actually stroll. And I said to my wife, let's go down the Potomac. And we walk along the Potomac, and you see these extraordinary monuments there. There's an unbelievable monument for the fallen American soldiers in the Korean War, and there's a wall there, and there's an inscription. It says, "Freedom is not free." It requires
blood,
not merely
sweat,
vigilance,
tears,
but the willingness to fight for it, to defend it, which is very true. And then from there we walk up to, and so obviously we identify with that because God knows we've had to fight for our freedom, fight for our very survival. In ancient times and modern times, the Jewish people have struggled like no other people. And then we walk up the, we see the Jefferson Monument, and it's those timeless words. We hold that all men are created equal.
These truths, yeah.
These truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they're entitled to certain inalienable rights. And then you go up to the Lincoln Memorial, and you've got this immortal address, government for the people, by the people. Now, I'll tell you why these words resonate so deeply with me and with all Israelis. Because they're basically Jewish concepts that were originated at the time of the Bible, thousands of years ago. That all men are created in God's image, that no ruler is above the law, that there should be universal justice. These were revolutionary Jewish ideas that were introduced thousands of years ago when the earth was ruled by vast slave empires. That's what changed history. So we feel a natural affinity to the United States. Some of the founding fathers of the United States said that the language of the United States should be Hebrew, because this was such a profound common wellspring of ideas. America and Israel are alike. Sometimes I think that the fanatic Muslims don't hate you because of us. They hate us because of you, because they feel that we represent a forward position of this common free civilization. And you know something? They're absolutely right. This is the bond. This is this fantastic alliance between Israel and America. It's these two countries that are bonded in this idea of liberty. And that liberty bill, let freedom, let liberty, proclaim liberty throughout the land. Well, I hope that we proclaim and succeed in establishing genuine liberty, genuine democracy in these vast lands of the Middle East. Believe me, if we do, we'll have peace.
And I'll have more of my exclusive interview with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on tomorrow night's show. And coming up later, the former Palin aide, who's now written a tell-all book about the former Alaska governor, is here in studio tonight. Plus, Let Not Your Heart Be Troubled, our great American panel is straight ahead. But also tonight, coming up, a tornado warning is in effect right now in Dallas. Right now, you are looking live at a potentially deadly situation in Texas. That is a live shot, and Janice Dean is live in our weather center. She will give us an update on what's happening in Dallas, coming up straight ahead. And this is a Fox News alert. There are a number of fatalities tonight in the suburbs of Oklahoma City after an outbreak of tornadoes struck at the height of the evening rush hour. Now, among the cities that were affected include El Reno, which suffered a direct hit. And for the very latest, including the tornado warning that is in effect in Dallas, Texas tonight, we go to the Fox Weather Center, where our very own Janice Dean is standing by tonight. Janice.
Sean, really horrible news. We've had reports of deaths because of this tornado outbreak. And if we could go live to our tower cam at KDFW, I'm going to show you where we have a tornado warning currently for Tarrant County. And if you look in the distance, you can see that massive cloud, seeing flashes of lightning as well. And earlier, it did look like we had a tornado in perfect view. So tornado warning for Tarrant County right now and Dallas counties. Severe thunderstorm with a history of producing multiple tornadoes moving east at 35 miles per hour. And that is good until 8:45 local time. There's hail being reported. Sirens are blaring in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we're hearing reports of Ranger fans actually being told to evacuate the building. So this is a really serious situation, as this is a densely populated city, Dallas, Texas, under a tornado warning. And unfortunately, Sean, looking here, we have tornado watches in effect for much of the evening into the overnight hours as this line of deadly tornadoes continues to move eastward. And there's Dallas. There's the current warning that we are looking at. Dallas under a tornado warning for the next several minutes. And I just want to point out on the radar, look at these storms blossoming right there. And when you see the pinks, the light pinks, that is showing you the intensity of this storm. We could see hail within the storm as well as debris if indeed this is a tornado. So we are closely monitoring the Dallas area as the storms continue to move eastward around 35 miles per hour. Not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination as we go into the overnight. And of course, that's the most deadly time you can have tornadoes. People are just not paying attention and you can't see them coming. A lot of these tornadoes are reportedly rain wrapped. So as they come, it's just we have a wall of water surrounding it. So tomorrow's severe threat, not as potent as today, Sean, but we're still looking at that moderate risk for Louisville down through Nashville and Memphis. And of course, this is the Mississippi River that we have seen incredible amounts of rain and flooding throughout the spring season. So unfortunately, the situation just continues to get worse. We'll continue to monitor the situation throughout the evening and into the overnight. And I will be here at the Fox Weather Center bringing you the very latest. But for now, Dallas, Texas, still under tornado warning, a really dangerous situation.
All right, thanks, very own Janice Dean in the Fox Weather Center. We'll continue to monitor all the events there and around the country tonight. As we continue with our Great American Panel, he is a financial advisor, radio talk show host, author of the book Buckets of Money. Ray Lucia is back. He's an editor at thedailycaller.com, a Fox News contributor, the one and only Tucker Carlson. She, a former White House press secretary, Fox News contributor, Dana Perino, also here tonight. First of all, thoughts and prayers with the people of Oklahoma City and Dallas and I mean and Joplin, Missouri, and everywhere else. These have been unbelievable. I really got to spend some time and listen to the Prime Minister. I watched this speech today. I felt like it was somebody that had the moral clarity of Churchill, of a Reagan, and an understanding because of the threat that Israel lives under. As you look at the time that he spent in the United States, culminating in this speech, what did you think?
Well, it's interesting that you would feel that way about him regarding Reagan, because
President
I think
Bush,
that today David Cameron and President Obama over in the UK were comparing themselves to Reagan and Thatcher, which might have been a stretch for some people to believe. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has implemented his strategy very forcefully, and it comes from his center of gravity, his understanding of his country, his belief in his leadership role. And the thing is, he was very respectful to President Obama in his interview with you, and there's a reason why. He had already won the argument. He didn't have to. And for the safety of Israel, for all of us who care about the state of Israel, he does have to still work with President Obama, and he laid out very clearly that he's not going to negotiate from a position of weakness.